This is a poem called Song of the Taste. Eating the living germs of grasses, eating the ova of large birds.
Brockport Writers Forum, in a continuing series of discussions with leading literary figures, presents The Poetry of Gary Snyder, one of the foremost poets of the century whose books of verse include The Back Country and Regarding Wave, and has published a collection of essays entitled Earth Household. Gary Snyder has extensively studied the Zen Buddhist discipline and Oriental languages and is active in the environmental movement. Discussing Mr. Snyder's works are Stan Samble Rubin, a poet, co-editor of Working from Silence, and a member of the Brockport English Department. And the host for today's Writers Forum, A. Poulin Jr., author of the book of poems In Advent, recent translator of the Duino Elegies, and director of the Writers Forum.
My parents were trying to make it on a marginal farming on stump land, cut-over land, clearing land, a few cows, some fruit trees, some chickens, some rabbits, some geese, while doing other jobs, seeking other employment also to keep things together. Diversified, semi-subsistent, poor country depression farm, that's all. Cows, Guernseys, a little dairying, a little chicken, egg raising. A chain of events involving response to nature, response to the forests that were on the boundary of that little farm, interest in that, search for knowledge about that, that led me beyond the world of our white neighbors who really didn't know very much about it, who didn't know the plants, really, except in the most obvious way. That triggered the whole process, I suppose, that leads into my being a poet of the sort I am today. Particularly that, in my case, the search for knowledge about this continent, the search for those people who can teach us about the continent, which in many cases turns out to be the American Indians, since no one else ever knew the continent in any depth but them.
Your mother used to read poetry to you.
She made me into a poet, at least in part. I mean, I'm sure she contributed to it a great deal because she got me listening to poetry. We were too poor to have a radio for a while, man. Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. I remember from maybe the age of 4 or 5. A lot of Poe. So that I was writing poems or making up poems before I could write, and having my mother write them down for me. It seemed like a natural enough thing to do. So I've been doing it all my life. And she conspired with me in doing this.
Yeah.
Poe sticks particularly in memory. Robert Louis Stevenson, The Child's Garden of Verses. We happened to have a copy of Robert Browning in the house, so I remember Robert Browning, which is nice. They're songs, you know. Scots dialect was a little hard for me as a child, but songs. And then I took off reading on my own very swiftly as a result of an accident while we were burning brush. So I couldn't walk for a while, so I had to read when I was 6. I read by myself exhaustively after that. And
Not poetry exclusively.
Oh, no, no. But I can remember specifically the poets that hit me through adolescence. Whitman, and then D.H. Lawrence, and then Jeffers. Reading very widely as a child, while living out in this marginal stump country, gave me a pretty large and historical sense of the language. You know, from any time like post-Shakespeare forward, you feel at home with English. That's nice. That gives you command of your tools, like a good carpenter knows the properties of various sorts of wood. That came to me naturally, just by exposure to a lot of it, and also living around a lot of working people, and as was our life, a lot of flavor, a lot of language that is the language of spoken English amongst people who really speak it with vigor. Either work is for you a drag, that you forget about as swiftly as possible, and it adds nothing to your experience of the world, or work is for you your play. And every job, every situation, every game-like survival trial that you go through, especially in periods of unemployment where jobs are hard to get, is interesting, and the breadth of people you meet is... I've had many jobs, and I've liked them all. The tension that I felt as a younger man was between the fact that I was of the people and that I had to work to live. There wasn't any welfare then. And on the other hand, a commitment to nature and a very clear comprehension of the destructive processes that were already underway, visible as logging, visible in the dams that were being put in the Columbia, which did do exactly what everybody said they would do at that time, and that is foul up the salmon runs, so that the salmon really couldn't get over the fish ladders. Things like that are part of our experience if we have lived in this country away from the major urban centers. We've seen the process, the gradual destruction of the natural systems around us taking place. So the tension in my life at that time was knowing and seeing very clearly what the process was, and knowing like where to put the finger on it, namely the Anglo mentality, the Anglo invaders mentality on a continent that they still treated as a conquered territory, namely North America, while myself as a working man being one of those who were doing it.
Right.
Working in the logging camps, for example.
I was thinking while you were reading of the other deer poem,
Long Hair?
Long Hair, which
Yeah.
would lead us into another area of discussion. Do you want to read Long Hair?
Once every year, deer catch human beings. They do various things which irresistibly draw men near them. Each one selects a certain man. The deer shoots the man, and the man has to skin it and carry its meat home and eat it. Then the deer is inside the man. He waits and hides in there, but the man doesn't know it. When enough deer have occupied enough men, they will strike all at once. Those who don't have deer in them will also be taken by surprise, and everything will change some. This is called takeover from inside.
That seems to be closely related to the opening poem, isn't it?
Yeah. If I were to put it intellectually, how natural systems surround us, pervade our lives, are inescapable, even though we may think of them as elsewhere, as not part of us. The deer are somewhere out there in the forest, we think. They are with us. They are our food. Our food is with us. Our food comes into us from the cornfields and soybean fields of Iowa, which is old buffalo range, which is an area that receives X amount of solar energy per acre per day, the same energy coming down as it always did. And the plants can only transfer so much of that energy into carbohydrates, and the animals can only transform so much of that energy into what would be carbohydrates or proteins accessible to our stomachs. The flow is always there. How do we understand our own internal natural systems in relationship to natural systems in the biosphere, in relationship to political, economic, and cultural systems which have been imposed on the biosphere and imposed on us, but are essential to us? Today is November 8th, 1972, and yesterday Mr. Nixon won. But did he win? What did he win? The real issues of the next decade, I don't think will be political in any normal or heretofore accustomed sense of the word. The real choice, now I'm going to do my ecological political rap, is the choice involving energy. We have two alternatives: to stop growth, to start out by slowing down growth, to take the path toward harmony and stability, and what they call steady state economy, to take that path, which means to reverse all of our ideas about economic growth, GNP, profit, how corporations work, what the goals of capitalism are. The other path is to say our growth is such, and it cannot be stopped, that we must develop further resources, namely both nuclear and additional fossil fuel, low-grade coal reserves, meaning 300 years of strip mining and hundreds of nuclear power plants over the next 50 years, the combination of which will make, I am absolutely sure, and many scientists will agree with this, will make the planet ultimately uninhabitable. This is being sold to us as the only way we can go, because they say America cannot turn back. America cannot stop its manifest destiny of growth. And besides, you are all junkies. You are all hooked. You wouldn't want your dope to be cut off, would you, baby? Nobody is willing to pay the price, they say. It's going to take a very informed, a very self-disciplined, and a very tough public to resist that blandishment.
How is this related to your work as a poet? You can sit and go into your ecological rap. Do poems make things happen?
I don't know. You know, for me, to bring it back to what Blake says, in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, in the section called The Voice of the Devil, and the devil is that old horned fellow with cloven hooves who is dancing around in the Paleolithic cave paintings. He's animal magic. At the end of it, Blake says, reason is the outward circumference or bound of energy. Energy is eternal delight. Now, energy back into ourselves and out of ourselves again, then. The power within. To know how to touch that. Now, that's the national park. Those are the geysers in Yellowstone, still around. And we've lost, over many centuries, we've lost the knowledge of how to use the power that's in us by an over-reliance on powers outside of us. Right? That's the whole message right there, really.
Getting back to what year this is, what day this is, you speak rather concretely of political means, that social involvement in the community means using such means as civil disobedience, outspoken criticism, protest, pacifism, voluntary poverty, and even general violence. What about that today?
I would add to that list of techniques something that was so obvious to me then I didn't write it down, but I think it has to be said now, and that is intense participation in local politics. Finding your way into your county or local town or city system, learning about it, not just going after it, but learning about it. At least in some parts of the country, on some levels, there's room for us to have some say, to have some control over small local destinies, over school boards, or whatever it is. Now, with the incumbent president in power for another 4 years, some of us may feel that there's nothing to do. I don't feel that's true. There's no contradiction in working within the system on one level while attempting to transform it totally, structurally, on another level. In a redwood tree, a marsh, which is saved, no matter by what means you went about doing it. It will be there, hopefully, then in our future. And you may work with strange people to do that, but it's worth it.
Gary Snyder, thank you very much.
My pleasure.